Welcome to another LabCo Fitness episode.
Oh, we missed you so much.
All right, so this is another LabCo Fitness episode, podcast AMAs. Today we have a bit shorter one. We have 4 questions, so we can dive really deep into them.
That's really good because nobody wants to look at this hair for very long.
Yeah, I'll have to.
I know, you don't have a choice. You're trapped.
Trapped. Alrighty, let me get my earphones in and we get started. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's start with the questions. The first question. The first question is by DW. And his question is, let me go up. Hi, my sister has Pectus Excavatum. It's not severe, but has a definite sinking of the chest wall. I've seen guys build hypertrophy around that area, minimizing its appearance. My thoughts, number 1, as a female, she is going to find it harder to get the same results purely through chest hypertrophy. Number 2, as well as building muscle, there should be focus on stretching, mobility exercises of the chest, spine, and ribcage to help her expand her chest and improve posture. Number 3, her chest will be severely tight already, and therefore she should look to minimize any muscle building work in this area. Now the questions. The first question is, what areas, exercises would you advise? Number 2, should she avoid muscle hypertrophy of the chest altogether, or do some hypertrophy of the chest but double up on the opposing muscles in the back?
Well,
So should
we got to start off by, explaining what Pectus Excavatum is. And what it is a congenital malformation of the front chest wall. And the non-medical way of describing that is that the bones come together incorrectly. And so technically they are matched up, but the problem is that instead of the sternum being even with the front of the ribs, it's way in. And so the ribs curve around, and it literally looks like there's a soup bowl built into somebody's chest when they lay on their back. And that's what the problem is. And so when it's really small, it's just a visual thing. If they are, depending on how deep it is, it can actually interfere with your lungs expanding and even your heart beating. So sometimes it has to be surgically corrected. And so I kind of got ahead of myself there. The way that you deal with this depends on how old somebody is. So when you're still growing and developing with young children, they actually have vacuum bells that provide constant pressure to slowly but surely bend the bones back into a normal position. That obviously doesn't work once your bones are finished growing. And so your options are essentially physical therapy and to some extent that will help. But the big thing is that if it is causing functional problems, then, surgery is the deal. And also if it's causing psychological problems that just cannot be overcome by the results available from non-surgical measures, that's another good reason to get the surgery. And, I'm not a surgeon. I don't necessarily like the idea of doing surgery for anything that doesn't need to be done, but you kind of have to put things in context. So if this is causing her, severe distress, then that's something that she and her doctors should be talking about. And so what we'll talk about is the physical therapy side. For the people who are in the lab, Alex Egebach actually gave a very good initial response, and I just added on to it with a little extra context, and I also included a link to a physical therapy protocol. And there's not...
Just quickly to go in, that's for the lab people. This
right.
So
well,
for the people,
I know that.
Yeah.
You gotta let me. You've got to let me finish, man.
Sorry, my bro. That's how I am.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So that's one of the advantages of membership is that you get these kind of interactions and you will get advice in real time, more or less. I'm going to pull up I won't worry about it right now, but on the podcast page we'll have a link to that therapy protocol, just because it helps to be able to look at things. Again, this is not a prescription for you. It is just making education available so that you understand how things are approached. For people who are doing our programs, a lot of this stuff is in the mobility section already. And there's no such thing as a certain muscle you shouldn't work. There's no muscle that goes from like here up at the collarbone down to the bottom of the chest and compresses it downward. And there's no muscle that goes from the left side to the right side and squeezes it or pulls it back in towards your spine. Those muscles don't exist. Somebody out there is going to say some shit about there's a malformation that's fairly rare, but it is around. It's called the sternalis muscle, and it is a failed migration of abdominal musculature. And functionally, it has no significance. Normal people don't have that. And so we're not going to go there, but there's going to be some people who are going to be smartasses and bring it up, and we have at least superficially covered it. That is not a normal human muscle. The big deal is that you want to stretch out the intercostal muscles because they can pull the ribs together. And you want to be doing a lot of so-called chest opening stretches. And the key here is that you have to be gentle. You're looking for long periods of stretching per day, 5 minutes at a time per stretch, not all at once necessarily, but you have to have kind of an accumulated amount of tension over a certain period of time to try and loosen tissues up. And a lot of this is really about letting the muscles move more, which is kind of the same as all other flexibility goals. You know what I mean? So it's not about treating things like they are rubber bands to be stretched out. It's about teaching your body to let motion happen. And then any rubber band material that does need to be stretched out will get stretched out as a consequence of that, but it keeps us from being too aggressive. And by avoiding an aggressive approach, we avoid injury as well. So that's the long and the short of it. And instead of kind of talking through those things, I want people to um hop on to the podcast page and click the link so that they can see, because you have pictures there, and the pictures are worth 1,000 words. So instead of boring you with 1,000 words, we'll just lead you to the pictures.
Alrighty. Moving on to the next question by Mauro Gomez Alvarez. He asks, does weighted isometrics like weighted planks, weighted front levers, weighted L-sits have a place, or are they suboptimal to build anything?
Well, for muscle building, they're 100% suboptimal. For learning to express your strength in a specific range of motion, they can be useful. This is kind of a rabbit hole question, because we could waste hours going down the different branches of where this goes. But to keep it to what was asked, there's really not a great reason to do that. Um, Having said that, you should always understand that your mileage may vary, and most people may get nothing out of it. There could be one or two people out of every 100 that do get a real benefit. So I don't think there's anything wrong with trying it, but it's not something that we like officially support in our programs, because it doesn't really have a significant place. The weightlifting and the weighted calisthenics that you do accomplish that just fine. And the most important thing is that adding weight to a position is not really going to give you what you need to improve the position. It's just going to force you further into what you're already used to. And there are some exceptions to that, but for the most part, that's true. And it's especially true with shoulder stuff, because the shoulder's so unstable that if you are already doing something wrong, adding weight is just going to make it worse. So I would be very cautious about when I do that. And if you decide to use weighted, I don't know why you would use a weighted plank, but I mean, some people, I guess, like that. So I would not do it until your plank is perfect. And, perfect meaning that you have all the right curves and they're not extreme, so all the boys should not be running to your yard. You should just look like a normal spine.
That's a good way of putting it.
I'm just saying,
That's
right?
like, oh damn, look at that booty.
Yeah, it's like you shouldn't have anything extreme going on. If you already have good form, then if you want to add weight to good form, go ahead. Whether it's worth it or not will depend on how you feel about it. From my perspective as a trainer and a coach, I would say no, it's not worth it. The only time it would be worth it is if you were gearing up for a performance that required you to hold something like that. So if you were doing like old school strongman stuff and you wanted to do like the human bridge or whatever, where people drive trucks over your back, you're going to have to do some stuff. But for normal stuff, no, it's not. It's very low yield.
Okay, cool.
So not
Moving on.
worthless, but there's so
No.
many other things that are a better use of your time that I just can't. I can't afford to make it sound like I in any way think it's a great idea. But you should still try things
Yeah.
out as long as you're not doing it in a stupid way.
It's like you said, it's suboptimal. It's not the best option.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be so much better
Moving
off
on.
just doing sit-ups, like good ones, doing the McGills, doing once you have the control for it, doing the decline sit-ups, doing proper weighted leg raises and things like that. You're just going to get so much more out of it. And then when you go practice your plank without having wasted a bunch of time, you're already going to be further along than if you had spent that same period of time just trying to build weighted planks. So there's just, to me, there's no reason. And that applies to everything else too.
All right, moving on to the next question by Matthew Gray. He asks, how should cuts be timed with your training phase? Do we align them with a skill cycle or what? Thanks for being awesome, y'all. Aw, thank you. Well, we've covered this in the lab in the past, but maybe
Yeah,
covering
there's
it.
been a
I
lot of
think you
questions
also
about
did.
that.
Yeah, but it's an important question though.
No, I
So
agree. I agree. So my perspective on
I say
this
mass
is that
cycle.
yeah, if I was going to pick
Uh,
one, I would say the same. And the reason is that the movements are simpler. So you're not really dealing with any, you're always going to be not quite at your best when you're at a calorie deficit because your body is missing something that it needs. So
mhm.
it doesn't mean you'll feel like crap, but you're not going to be at your absolute best. And so it helps to do that with programming designed to maximize muscle retention. And that's essentially mass cycle programming. The exercises you use are really whatever, but you really want to be using exercises that give a better range of motion with more controllable weight, allows you to use resistance without any serious safety compromises. And those are the things that make the mass cycle programming so good for cuts. You could also do that on a strength cycle. The big difference is that you you'll just have to see what you like. So I don't want to pigeonhole people too much in. The cycle is less important than making sure you're getting the right work in. Um, the real underlying question here to me is how often should I be trying to cut? And you shouldn't be trying to cut more than twice a year because you're not going to be giving yourself a chance to get bigger and stronger if you do. And here's the thing: when you go into a cutting cycle, you're going to be sending mixed signals to your body. When you exercise, you're trying to send growth signals. But when you're in a calorie deficit, your body is like, well, I got to get rid of everything expensive, which is why it's so important to use the muscles multiple times per week. Um, the with long cuts, especially if you are trying to, so there's a difference in different kinds of cuts, right? If you're at like 22% body fat and you're looking to cut down to 12%, you're not going to lose any muscle if you're doing it right. You'll probably still build some. So this doesn't so much apply to you. But for the people who are like, I want badass Instagram photos this summer and I need to look like I'm wrapped in freaking, wet paper and my muscles are right beneath it, then you are going to lose some muscle mass, and that's okay. That's a normal thing that everybody under the sun goes through when they try and get that lean. Um, the problem is that it then takes time to build that muscle mass up again. So, let's say that you lose 5-10 pounds of muscle mass during that cut, you're going to have to put that muscle back on. And that's probably going to take you another like 2 months. It comes on way faster when you're just getting it back, but it still takes time. And so if you're doing that for like, 2 months, if you cut for 2 months and then you spend 2 months getting back to where you were before the cut, and then you cut again, because you're doing 3 cuts per year, then you just wasted your whole year. You went nowhere. And you're going to be frustrated with your results. You'll make maybe a little bit of progress, but not very much, and you're not going to know why. And it's because you didn't give yourself a dedicated period of time to get better, and cuts are not when you get better. They're just when you drop body fat. So there's a reason to do them, but you just have to ask yourself if you are giving yourself the opportunity to become stronger, and that's really all about saying, I really shouldn't be spending more than a third of my year in a calorie deficit at most, because I'm also going to have to recover afterwards before I can grow again. And you know, I would always suggest that you get, like, in the beginning, people should be spending their whole year growing. They really shouldn't be cutting unless they are like medically obese and actually need to get slimmer for either like medical purposes or for psychological health. And then as soon as they get where they need to be, we should be spending, I would say at least 6 months out of the year in an actual calorie surplus. And it doesn't have to be at once. You could do like 2 months and then take a month for maintenance and just repeat that a couple of times, and then at the end of the year do a 2 month cut, and that's totally fine. You'll strip away all the extra fat that you had put on during the year. You're going to look better at the same body fat percentage, and so everything is great. That's like the ideal thing, and people just don't know enough about how the timing affects things. So I would set it up to where you're lean at the time of the year you want to be lean. That's usually summer,
Yeah.
and if all things being equal, I agree that it should be done with mass cycle programming. My second choice would be, and now the caveat there is that you may not be able to add volume quite the way you would like to, and that's okay. That's okay. When I say mass cycle programming, I should be clear and say that I do think you should still be using a controlled eccentric, because that's going to give you a better mechanical stimulus on the recruited fibers. So the and the resulting stimulus is going to cause a little bit more inflammation, and believe it or not, that's very important for muscle maintenance. So you're keeping the pathways that tell your body, I need this tissue active for longer after each workout. So it's just a more efficient way to go about doing this. Second choice would be strength programming, and the third one would be kind of what we're doing with the skills cycles. So I would not intentionally cut with our specific skill cycle unless you just have the hankering to do so. It's not wrong. I just don't think that it will give you the best overall results. Does
Can
that
I
make
ask?
sense?
Yeah. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, so what if is there a way of staying on maintenance calorie wise, but having a super high protein diet? So I'm talking about 3.5 to 4 times gram per kilogram. And yeah, I'm talking about pretty high here. And because I remember you mentioning a year or two back on some
Mhm.
research done on that. And I was wondering, is that a way of doing what we call recomp? You know what I
No,
mean?
you're really talking about like lean gaining, and
Basically.
it's a myth. I'm not, when I say it's a myth, I mean that you cannot make the same gains in a 12-month period
Mm-hmm.
by doing that as you can doing just a more intelligent, slow bulk and then a cut at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And the end of the year doesn't have to mean Christmas time. It could be summer or whenever you want. It's just you have a 12-month cycle. and you just time it so that you are basically packing mass on for essentially 9 or 10 of those months, and then you strip away the fat over the course of 2 or 3 months, and then you start again. Um, that is how all successful uh, natural bodybuilders do this.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and it's part of why I like the natural guys are starting to look better and better. There's a little more money in it now than there used to be. It's still not great, but with YouTube and everything, there is more incentive to go for it. And it's also why there's obviously a ton of pro hormone use, and you never know who does what. But there's a lot of gifted guys out there, and the knowledge that we have today is so much better than it was even 5 years ago. And guys like Jeff Nippard and are really bridging the gap with the common person. And so this knowledge is becoming more widely recognized, and I think that you're going to see a general improvement in how the average person is training as a result of that. you know so I like name dropping him. I think that most of his content's really good. I always have gripes with almost everything I hear, which I think is true of everybody who knows a lot. But the truth is that you put us all in a room, and like 95% of everything we're going to say, yep, totally agree. um and so I like his stuff. I love all the podcasts and episodes that you hear from like Dr. Israel, from
Yep.
Eric Helms, and you're going to hear the same thing from all of us over and over and over again. Um, just like right now, Dr. Israel is in a prolonged cut. He's been cutting for months, and he's been taking it real, real slow. And he just has somebody else in charge of his nutrition, even though he knows what the fuck he's doing. Somebody does his training and somebody does his nutrition, and he just uses the app that he made, and he is just doing exactly what we have y'all do. Just follow the program, and oh, look, shit works great. And, one of the repeated comments that he's been putting out over the last couple of months is that, I've just been doing so much better when I kind of let go of this stuff, let somebody else put it together for me, and just go to the gym and do what I need to do and stop thinking so much. And you know, it's a that's a common truth that's going to be found by every single person who ever goes to the park or the gym or wherever it is that you like to work out. So I think it's super important, and that's a really important mindset to have. You keep the basics in. You get a small calorie deficit. You eat foods that make it easy to maintain that deficit, and you do the work that you need to do to hang on to your muscle, which is basically the same work you do to grow. And you keep your protein a little higher during a cut. That's the only real change that you make, is you drop the calories a little and you raise the protein a little, and everything else kind of stays the same, which makes it super easy when you think like that. It's a small shift, but it changes how your body is going to reshape over the next 3 to 6 months. And then when you get where you want to be, you make a new set of changes that put it to where you want it to be next. And that's how you do.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Let's move
Did that
on. Yeah,
did that get what we needed out of that?
it did. I just had some more questions on the lean gains thing because I find it quite interesting, because I know a lot of people talk about cut, and the reason for that is,
Oh yeah.
so a reason why people want to are talking so much about a cut is because a lot of them are doing for the aesthetic reasons, and it's really hard to do like a 1 year of working on only gaining
There-
weight, because people want to look good immediately, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah, everybody wants that instant gratification. They want to
that's
be able to pop it up on Instagram right now.
That's
And
that's why
it's
I'm kind of exploring that
realistic.
lean gains thing in this podcast. I just want to know a little bit more about
We
that.
can explore it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Remember how I mentioned the mixed signaling issue? That's the same problem that you get when you're trying to do something with like a quote unquote lean gain. Um, there's nothing you can do to fool your body's intracellular signaling. There's either
Mhm.
more essentially Krebs cycle intermediates than it needs, or there's less.
Yeah.
And there's no way around that. And the shifts that occur either in an excess or a deficit are what determine how well you either get rid of body fat or pack on new muscle.
Yeah.
And when you are neither in a surplus or in a deficit, then you really don't have strong signaling either way. And that's kind of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
It gets in the way of you trying to gain muscle. And and what ends up happening is that your body will ratchet down its metabolism very slightly so that without realizing it, you're going to be in a slight surplus. And you are essentially, but then that surplus, so this is I wish that I had like a whiteboard to just kind of write things on, but essentially, what's going to happen is that you're going to have like a small surplus in certain areas, meaning that your overall metabolism is very likely. It's okay. So when you exercise, you're creating a new energy output. And if you're not eating any more food, then you're slowly doing more work over time because that's how all successful programming works.
Yeah.
And so you're burning more energy, right?
Yeah. So you're eating
Which
more.
is it's going to make it hard. Well, what people don't realize is that they are going to start eating more. It's an autoregulatory thing, and you have to be like obsessive with scales and containers and scoops to avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is not necessarily a healthy habit to do long term. It just depends on how you do it, and whether or not it makes you crazy. But the um, the bottom line is that no matter what you do, the differences are so small, you don't really have that enough of a difference to put you high enough above maintenance to really kick the anabolic signaling into high gear long term, throughout the course of the day. And so you really are kind of spinning your wheels, and you might put on 3 or 4 pounds during the year doing that of like legitimate lean mass,
Mm-hmm.
and that's still a success. But if you could have put on 15, I view that as a failure. I view
Yeah.
that as missing 11 pounds. What the hell's wrong with you? Don't do that to yourself. If you want to be, and that's the problem is that, people like to lie on Instagram and the people listening to them like to believe the lies.
Yeah, of
And
course, because it's the cool truth or the cool lie. The thing you
they're,
want
they're
to.
just telling,
It,
yeah, they're giving
yeah.
you what you want to hear. It's the same
Exactly.
thing that
That's
salespeople have done since
easy
forever.
marketing.
Yeah, it's playing to your weaknesses and it's playing to your vulnerabilities and it's playing to your desire to magically catch up to the people who are ahead of you.
Yeah.
And, it's much sexier to say just do this thing and you can look great and get bigger and do all this stuff at the same time than it is to say check it out. We're going to actually spend most of the year building and then we're going to strip the fat away and then you're going to look like a badass. Which actually works, you know but you're like, hang on, I got to do a year of work to look great? The hell out of here. Give me those
Exactly.
pills.
That's quite.
That's what they do.
It's also an issue that I, as a trainer, have had is like I get
Yeah.
people now during this period, summer's coming, and they're all
Yep.
skinny, and
Yep.
I gotta tell them you gotta bulk, but they're like, look at my belly. I'm like, I
Yeah.
know, but you gotta bulk.
And that's where I say, you know what? Let's just use summer for skill building because
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to gain because your mind is not going to let you eat enough
Yeah.
because you worry about how your belly looks. So, fuck it. No more gains during the summer. I don't even care. I don't care if you get weaker because I can't convince you to do shit different anyways. So instead, let's improve our form. Let's have a little fun. Let's improve our form on the exercises that are going to get us our mass later on. And then once you're out of the summer and you're wearing shirts again,
Yeah.
start eating. Because you just have to roll. I mean, it's not wrong that people are like that. It's a natural thing. We want
It
people
is.
to look
I
at us so
mean-
they want to have our babies. So it's built into us.
Yeah.
And,
It's rare to see someone who's not like that actually. So only the people who
Yeah.
actually want performance.
I was like that. I've had plenty of vanity,
Yeah.
and I always looked great during the summer. But I also always built the hell out of myself from like August to April. So I didn't care. It just depended on what I needed at the time. And I didn't do it in anywhere near as organized a fashion that I would do now. But the basics were still there. You know what I mean? Like I understood that I had to get a little fatter than I wanted to be in order to be stronger than I was now.
Yeah.
And so it was okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've actually I've never planned my bulking and cutting cycles well. I've always been fat during the summer and extremely lean in the winters. So
Yeah,
and
that's so weird.
and this summer is gonna be the same thing because I was injured, and now when you're injured, you got to keep eating because you don't want to lose that muscle mass,
Yeah.
and it's not a good idea to be cutting now in this period of getting back into things. So I'm not gonna look good, and I
Mhm.
gotta accept that. But I was just
Yeah, but you know the funny thing though is that like you don't look good, but then if you go take a picture, somebody's like, "Bro, you're buff." Like,
true, but you know
how
what?
do I look like you?
I was with Yuri von Gelder yesterday, and I looked like shit
Yeah.
again.
No, you still looked pretty good.
You know,
You
I've
did.
I've
You
seen
did.
better.
Yuri actually looked a little bit flat.
I mean, he's at 6% body fat now because and the camera doesn't show that, but he lost 4 kilos of muscle mass.
I knew it.
Yeah, he lost.
I could tell, man. I could
Yeah,
tell.
he told
You
me.
can tell. Yeah, you can
But
tell. And that's the thing. It's not going to make him better on his competition.
yeah, but it's also he's just had a rough time lately, and won't
Yeah.
get too much into it. But basically, he touched
It's
his
hard.
stomach.
He's 37
I
or
know.
35 or whatever.
Yeah, and when
I
the community
mean,
doesn't support you, and you're
jeez.
always training alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I get that. I mean, I don't do well that way either. And it's just a tough place to be. And
I totally get it, man.
yeah.
But the point being, so I was trying to. So what? Let me ask you another question. Since we're talking about his lean gains, and we're talking about how people want to stay lean, what would be
Yeah.
the most ideal middle point for someone who wants to get performance, but at the same time wants to look fairly good? He doesn't want the most optimal performance
Ooh,
thing, but he wants something
that's
like
tricky.
yeah. So that's a good question.
It is. And it's so that, we got to start off. There's no one answer to that. So there's a couple of things that go into it. One is, what are you doing? So if you're a football lineman and you're less than 15% body fat, you are just not going to be able to compete,
Yeah.
period. If you are a running back and you're over 12 to 15%, you're probably going to be slower than you should be, and you're not going to be able to jump as high as you should. And there's a bunch of other stuff. So I should say like wide receiver. So, depending on your the positions in the sport,
Well, let me simplify that.
that's gonna change the range.
Yeah.
But the truth is that each athlete's gonna have to figure that out for themselves. What we always say, what every single high end trainer will ever tell an athlete is, you have to, like, let's watch your numbers. Let's see how fast you are. Let's see how well you recover. Let's see how well you play. And then based on those things, we'll just keep track of your characteristics, and your body's going to tell us where it does the best. And, if we try to change it and it gets worse, guess what? That's not the right place for you, even though your teammate who has the same stats as you does better at that composition. So you may have one guy who is better at 9% and another guy who's better at 13%.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
genetics go into that. If you're not naturally a retardedly lean person, then being super lean is never going to be where you do your best. And that's just kind of the way that it is.
So
it's not fair.
Let me adjust the question a little bit to our audience, because our audience are mainly people who do bodyweight fitness for fun.
Right.
But at the
right.
same time, they want to get pretty good at it. But at the same time, they want to look good.
Mhm.
So let's talk about those people.
I would say, so for them, what I would say is, look at the body fat pictures at like 10%, 12%, 15%, and 17%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The people who are reasonably well built, I'm not talking about championship bodies here. These are like regular people who have just, put a little bit of work in and have decent muscle mass at those body fat percentages, are going to look really, really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
And, you get down, like, in most people, when they look at somebody, especially like my size or Olaf's size, who is at 10, 12%, they think we're at like 7 or 8%. They have no idea.
Yeah, that's an important thing to, because you remember when I
Yeah.
was at your place, I was around 8%.
Mhm.
You measured with a calipers. I mean, that's 3% deviance. But I was
Yep.
super lean, but I didn't look that lean.
No,
You
but
know?
you have a lot of water. These people that you see, one of the things that everybody doesn't realize is that they also go through a salt and water manipulation for a
Yep.
week. And it totally changes the way you look. I mean, there's actually a wonderful 5-day blog on this, where a guy dropped 20 pounds it was either 20 or 30 pounds in water weight over the course of 5 days and showed the difference in how he looked. And it was like bananas. And it's not surprising to me because I've been around these weight cutting sports forever. But, most people have no idea. This is like a black box. They've
Yeah.
never even heard of this. And so they just don't know.
That's a
And
good
that
point.
water weight's huge. Yeah. So like that's another thing you have to realize is that when you're trying to look your best and you're doing a photo shoot and you look at these people, you don't know some of the things that they've done to look the way that they look on camera. And that is very, very important to understand. That's what we call the quote unquote contest prep period, the week or two before competition for an aesthetic sport like bodybuilding or these fitness competitions. Um, you have a totally different thing. It's just like what fighters and wrestlers do, the smart ones. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna ask one more question about lean gains, and
Mhm.
that question is regarding protein intake. And I remember you talking about the 4 gram category, 4 grams per kilogram. That
Yeah,
was
so
a
that
long
was
time ago, but I wonder
yeah,
what your
that was
stance is on
different.
that now.
Yeah, well, they haven't really changed, but we have to put context in so people know what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Just say yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, Jose Antonio et al. Showed that over the course of a year, taking in 3.5 to 4.4 grams per kilo caused no changes in kidney function, no changes in liver function, and the whole point of that was to debunk the idea that super high protein intake from a dietary source could in any way damage a healthy person's organs.
Okay.
And the other thing that he has data on is that going up to 3 grams per kilo does seem to improve uh, lean gain or mass retention during a cut.
Yeah.
So there is a difference, and this is more pronounced in people with more muscle mass.
Yeah.
And that should make sense once you take a moment to think about it. When you have more expensive tissue, and when I say expensive, I mean it just takes more energy to maintain. When you have this high maintenance tissue like muscle mass, when you don't have a whole lot of it, your body's not that particular. It's not that far off from its norms. So it's like, yeah, okay, I'll hold on to it. You don't need to convince me that hard. But then when you're walking around with a warehouse full of this stuff and your body's like, man, this is costing me a lot of money here. This is really difficult. I'm having to reroute resources all the time. Can you just let some go? And so you have to say, no, shut the hell up, have some extra protein. And and that's really the big difference is that it takes more protein per kilo to suppress catabolism to the same degree as you have more and more muscle mass.
Does
And
that
so, yeah.
does that ultimately also? So let's talk about we're not cutting.
It does no, it does not. Okay, so here's the thing. What you have to realize is that as you get bigger, your intestines don't get any bigger.
Yeah.
So I just want to let that sink in is that 100% of the protein that you get from your diet has to get soaked up by your intestines. And
Mhm.
they don't change. Whatever you got, you got. And so when you are smaller, you are capable of absorbing so much more protein per pound of muscle mass that you have that you're going to be able to exceed your needs really easily. And then as you get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, you do have to start becoming more particular about uh, the way that you structure your protein intake if you want to keep growing, because it is a lot easier to maintain muscle mass than it is to grow it.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And so it's easy to get cut in this cycle where, okay, well, yeah, I was growing stuff for like 6 or 7 hours, but then my body started breaking it down. And so you get caught in this like cycle to where I'm not building very fast and I'm kind of breaking down during other parts of the day. And it leads to a lot of paralysis by analysis. And
Mhm.
the easy way to think about it is that, if you're still growing, you don't need to make changes. If you're stopped growing and everything else is on point, and to know that you really need to have a consult, you know, and with somebody very, very good. Um, but if you've taken a look at things and you realize, well, my calories look like they're good, and my protein intake per pound per day or kilo per day or whatever looks good, and I'm still really not getting there. Um, then that's when you have to start taking a look at meal timing and things like that. It is one of the last things that really makes a meaningful difference. It does, but not until you are at a point to where everything else is kind
On
of
point,
already
yeah.
optimized. Yeah,
But does it
Then you
make
just have to
sense?
redistribute.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to even be in a very, very high protein diet when you do a bulking cycle, where you're basically doing hypertrophy.
Sometimes not. It usually makes more sense to be in a cutting cycle when we're saying this backwards. It makes more sense to use high protein, like super high protein, when you're in a cutting cycle because it
Mm-hmm.
tends to cut down on hunger and it tends to help you maintain your muscle mass more. And that's what you really need. So,
Okay. But you
you know what I'm
don't, yeah,
saying?
but you don't gain extra muscle, basically what I'm trying to say, when you're
No, you do up to a point, but not like that. Like there's a point where like guys like Olaf now and like Sebastian, they'll probably benefit from making sure they're getting like 2.5 grams per kilo.
okay.
But I don't think there's anybody alive that's benefiting from getting 4 grams per kilo
Mm-hmm.
in terms of extra muscle gain.
Okay.
Um, so that's a totally now what has been shown is that and this is getting into an area that um I think is probably not worth me talking about too much because I think that you have to know an awful lot for this to make sense.
Okay.
It's not easily accessible, but the there was also data from Jose Antonio showing that, and this was an unexpected result. They did not expect to see this, but what they found looking at their data was that when people were at maintenance, but they were having a higher, like a super high protein intake, that they were putting on less body fat for the same amount of lean mass gain.
So that's
And
very interesting.
so they're still in a surplus. That's what you have to understand.
Yeah, yeah.
Here's the way that I would explain that to the layperson so that this makes sense.
Okay.
The surplus is all from protein. So if you are basically getting your maintenance from fats and carbs, and then your surplus is coming from protein. So for example, if you're getting 200 grams of protein a day, that is 800 calories. And so an 800 calorie surplus is a little bit much, but a 400 calorie surplus, pretty reasonable for most people. That's plenty to grow on. So if you need, 3,000 calories a day, and your fats and your carbs are getting you maybe like 2,700, 2,600, and then you're having 800 calories from protein, that protein is creating all of your surplus, and it's also, kind of a part of the deficit as well, if that makes sense. Like, so you have the deficit part, it's making up a part of what gets you your maintenance, and then it's also 100% of your surplus. And that when you look at the biochemical pathways available for protein, it's very hard to build meaningful fat mass from protein. And because protein is shunted in so many different areas. You make extra
Mm-hmm.
carbs that you need from it. You make all of your immune proteins. You make all your intracellular proteins. It's not just muscle mass. There's a huge amount
Yeah.
that is protein based, and then the excess gets oxidized, so it's burned directly aerobically, and the only thing that happens there is that you're just burning a little bit less carbohydrate. It's kind of the same thing. The body fat stuff is very hard to manipulate. Your body just kind of does what it does. So and the other thing is, like what I was saying, your intestines are only so big. You can only absorb so much protein in a 24-hour period, and it's a much lower amount than carbs or fats. I mean, those technically have limits too, but they're really fucking high. So the that's kind of what I want
So
to try and get
a quick
across.
summary will be, so for the layman, basically you'd make more, you'd be more
I would
towards
not worry
lean.
about this. I wouldn't
Yeah.
worry about it. If you plug your numbers in and your
Yeah.
FFMI is not like at least 25, then I wouldn't even fuck around with this shit. I would just get your
Yeah.
programming on
You
point,
know
get your
you know why I'm
calories on
asking?
point, and get protein every 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, you know why I'm asking? Because
Nope.
I built this habit throughout the years of taking 3 shakes a day, and I've been doing
There
it
is a
during the
point
bulk
of
and during the cut, and I'm like, well, should I even be doing this? But it's like it's such a habit. I'm like, well, it's not
it's fine.
detrimental, but does it have any positive? Anything?
Yeah, more so.
positive to
I mean,
it?
getting more protein during the cut is very beneficial. Getting the
That
protein
one
more
I always
off,
do. Yeah.
getting more protein or getting protein doses more often during a bulk is beneficial. Do you see the difference in what I said there?
I see exactly what you say. Yeah.
That's what I want people to catch on to, is that the amount that you're getting per day is much more important during a it's important in both, but getting a good amount and maybe slightly more than you technically need during a cut is going to benefit you for multiple reasons. And it also turns out that the timing doesn't really matter that much during a cut. Um,
Yeah.
However, the timing does matter somewhat during a bulk, and how much that timing matters depends on how much muscle mass you already have, because that determines how much you have for addition, or how much leeway you have for overhead, meaning like how much more can you really build. And optimizing those things is difficult as you get bigger. You can't just get more at each meal, because you start reaching a saturation point in terms of how long does that meal take to get through your gut, and how much protein can you
Mm-hmm.
get from it. And you're gonna even out, and you'll just stop growing eventually. You're gonna be really big by the time that happens. You're gonna be big and strong and have probably already exceeded your goals. But if you're one of the ones who's looking to be everything they can possibly be, then there is a point at which you have to start eating more often in terms of the protein. The rest of the stuff, it doesn't matter so much, but you have to
Yeah.
start spreading the protein out. Yeah, at some point.
Yeah. I just a year ago I just counted my calories and was like, what am I actually doing? Because it had been a while since I actually measured. I was like, okay, let me check again,
Hmm.
and I noticed I was around 240 grams of protein without even knowing I did that, both during the bulk and during the cut, and the calories always were accordingly to the cycle. 3,500 during my bulk and 3,000 during my cut. That was how, or not
Hmm.
maintenance, because I never really cut. Cutting would be around 2,800 for me. But I just noticed, I was like, oh, that's interesting to see that I take so much protein at 63 kilo body weight. So that's almost
Hmm.
4 grams per kilogram. That's why I'm asking all of this. I'm like,
Hmm.
what's going on? Do I need to change that? And my conclusion
I
is
mean,
no, I
it
don't have
depends.
to.
No, if you feel good, then fine. That's the thing, is that there's a minimum number you want to get, and then going past that is about personal comfort.
Yeah, I personally feel better on a
Yeah,
very high protein diet.
and so I would say just do it. Yeah.
Yeah. All
If you
right.
felt bad, I
Sorry
would
guys
say
for
don't.
hijacking this. Sorry for hijacking this protein for this podcast. I mean, let's go back to the last question you guys asked. This question was asked by Nico Plato, and he says, and this is the last question: I've been experiencing a bit of pain during the straddle stretches. I feel like my
Mhm.
inner thigh gets strained from doing the Goku stretch. The Goku stretch being the lunge stretch. You know which one I mean, Josh? The one that Goku always does
I know
before he
what you're.
fights. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
know what you're
sure which
talking about.
specific muscle it is.
It's. I believe that's lizard pose in yoga.
Uh, I'm going to quickly look that up just to make sure. Lizard pose.
You're basically in a long lunge, and then you put your elbows on the ground, essentially, so
Well,
that your
no, that's not that
body.
one.
I thought that
It's
it
not that
is.
one. Let me show you. Because we actually put this in the wait,
Yeah, and
Goku.
I haven't had time to look at all that stuff, so I don't know.
No, that's fine. Can you see my screen? This one,
Oh God, I hate that
the
stretch.
Goku pose. Yeah, it's this one. And he says he has pain.
That's a Cossack squat.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, you're right. But he's saying I'm not sure which specific muscle it is, but I'm guessing it's the adductor magnus. Is there a way I can progress
I doubt it.
safely with my flexibility without injuring
First off,
myself?
unless the pain is going down into his knee, I don't think it's that muscle. And I would not worry about what muscle it is at all. What I would do is,
Yeah.
before doing that stretch, I would get on a foam roller and just sit right on the point that hurts for about a minute. And then I would do the stretch. And I would also strongly consider doing that stretch with a support in front of you, So do it by a railing or a tree or a rack or something that you can hang on to so that you're taking some of the stress off the muscles. Does that make sense? And the
Makes
other thing
sense.
is that, not every, like, that is in no way a necessary stretch, but a lot of people like it. So to me, if that stretch doesn't work well for you right now, I'd probably stay away from it. But if you don't want to stay away from it and you want to see if you just need a little bit less stress on your muscles, then I would use a hand support. And I would also
Yeah.
be careful about how deep you go. I mean, um, that just kind of is what it is. But the other thing, like the stretch that I mentioned, I believe should be one of the fundamentals in the mobility routine, and I don't know what it's under, and it's part of why
The
like
lizard pose.
the mobility routine is meant to be a sort of an all around thing that you do. So if you're picking and choosing, then I can't help you very much because that's no different than saying I want to bake a cake, but I really only like eggs, so I'm just going to mix up a bunch of eggs. Like you're going to have a shitty cake. It's it's not. I'm just saying.
That's not a cake.
It's not a cake. It's just a bunch of eggs, and that's fine.
It's
But
also
you have to know what you're
tasty.
getting.
I go for that
I
right now.
mean, I would eat it, but you know, um,
But,
I would. Yeah,
uh,
I probably wouldn't pay a restaurant if that's what they brought when I asked for chocolate cake. You
yeah,
know,
makes sense. You make a valid point.
so that's just it's one of those things where I'm not trying to rag on anybody. I'm just these are things we don't think about, and I want to make sure that you know you understand that everything has an overlapping effect in some area. And, if you are doing the whole mobility routine and that stretch doesn't work well with you, you should not do that stretch. But you can try the sort of those two modifications that I just mentioned using the foam roller or the ball or whatever it is that you use to specifically sort of inhibit the activity of the muscle that you feel like is hurting, and typically that will actually do a great job all on its own. And then also using a hand support so you can take some of the stress off. And again, these are things that, like, if we were doing things in person, I start people that way because I just don't take chances. I just make sure that people can learn and get comfortable early on, because if you do something that's too much early on and your body learns to freak out and overreact, it's going to remember that. So I always take the philosophy of I want to teach your body good reactions from the beginning so that you don't have to deal with any undoing. You know what I mean? I don't like
Yeah.
you having to take steps backwards if it's not absolutely necessary. So um, that is something that I would keep in mind moving forward.
Alrighty, man. That looks like we answered every question, including my questions. So thank you for doing
Oh,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I was gonna say, so
Um.
you were talking about with your shoulder doing cars, pails, rails. For people who don't know, these are
Yeah.
just rehab things. They do the same thing in a different way. All these things you're doing is changing muscle activity in a particular range of motion, and that
Hmm.
may also be helpful for this person. So, like, for example, before going into that stretch, what this is going to do is going to take advantage of antagonistic inhibition, which people call reciprocal inhibition. And so before he goes down into that stretch, what he may want to do is put that leg up in a similar position on a chair and try and lift it and pull it out, and hold that position for like 15 seconds a couple of times, and then go down into the stretch, and to probably find that muscle doesn't act up as much. So there's multiple ways of going about this um, that are really easy and really effective.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, you're right.
Those are
How
things
about
that
that for
eventually will start working in.
just an
To me,
update
that's
for
a
people? Yeah, just continue.
Oh yeah, I was going to say. I mean, those are things that'll end up appearing, inside the lab, so that people have more and more options for troubleshooting themselves and
Yeah,
making progress. Yeah, it just takes
yeah.
time.
Uh,
We don't know when we'll be able to get to that. We have a pretty full production cycle, but it will be
for
coming.
the people who are wondering, how my shoulders are doing and everything. Maybe Josh too. He's probably also wondering that.
Hmm.
It's going pretty well. I'm actually really doing well since I'm basically doing a lot of external rotation, active range of motion build up. And one thing that helped me a lot a few days ago, I found out, is when I was benching, sometimes I would get impingement in my left shoulder. So what
Hmm.
I do now is so people can see me, you can't, but I'll explain to you. Is I do the external rotation, like a Cuban rotation, but then in the air, basically, of my left arm, and then I hold that and I try to externally rotate really hard with the arm that hurts. Okay.
Hmm.
And so I keep holding that, and then I get into my position while trying to focus that same tension in that shoulder. Then I grab the dumbbells or bar, depending on which variation I'm doing. And I try to
Hmm.
focus on keeping that external rotation in that particular position while doing the presses. That helped a
Hmm.
lot, but eventually I couldn't do that anymore. And the next
Hmm.
step that helped was uh, muscle radiation, basically. So I just squeezing every muscle in there as hard as I can, and then just press. And that was the next step that basically made me pain free in bench presses. Um, in pull ups, I'm also doing very good. But since that the muscles that had to overcompensate for the past few months are so inflamed, uh, I can't expect that to be like an instant fix for that one. So I'm doing that so that everything is set perfectly in my mind.
Hmm.
And then hopefully when the inflammation is down, I can start doing some progressive overload, which is probably in a month or two.
Well, like one of the things that's going to help you a lot is kind of the similar thing. So this is a so there's an entire like certification series around something called muscle activation techniques, and they're essentially very specific pails basically, and
Yeah.
the they're essentially what they do is they like to use something that they call positional isometrics. And what they want to do is they put a joint into a position and rotation that allows for a very specific muscle to fire first. And so you use
Uh huh.
absolute minimal force. Like the key here is that it's not a strength thing, it's actually the opposite. It's like I want you to only use this one muscle. So you're not going to push very hard. You're not going to produce much force, but I want this thing to turn on first. And that makes a big difference in how things work. And so eventually, we'll want to be putting some routines together to teach people how to do some of these things. But the
Yeah.
the concept is the same everywhere. People use different words for it. Um, the but the bottom line is that you need to teach your body how to work differently than it currently does. And like, for you with the bench press especially, what you really need is to be benching with Olaf or Sebastian there, and
Uh
to
huh.
be doing a specific rotation for you. I've fixed so many shoulders this way that I've basically lost count, specifically for bench. And I
Well.
used to do this all the time. And what you do, and you'll see my video, but basically what what they're going to do is they're going to be standing behind you in a typical spotter position,
Hmm.
and they're going to have their fingers wrapping basically close to the inferior edge of the scapula, and
And
then
push
or the
basically,
inferior
I guess.
angle, and their thumbs are going to be over the coracoid, not the acromion. You have to be a little inside there.
Yeah,
They're going to be
I
over
know
the
what you're doing here.
coracoid.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're going to
Like,
kind of
tilt.
rotate you out. Yeah, yeah. And so what they're doing is you're just stretching the skin so that they're, giving you this sensory cue to kind of open up and stay opened and not collapse in.
Yeah.
And that's basically going to take care of it immediately, and you will be able to do your set as long as they kind of keep that pressure there without much of any issue. And the other thing I do when people have a more severe issue on one side is that I do the same manual adjustment that I did with you when you were over here, which is to give a
Yeah. Yeah.
slight upward rotation, but I do that just real slightly before each set. And what happens is that very rapidly it just teaches your body to do things in that new position, and you start feeling it and you're like, "Oh, this is just like what I do now. It feels good. It's easy to find." And and that's like once you're over that bridge, you typically okay. But that's one of those things to where like you do what you need to do when you're alone, but there is nothing
I
that
I
you
had
can
to
do
do.
by yourself that's as good as what somebody can do in the moment with you. So like
Yeah,
take
I
advantage
had
of
to come
that
up.
whenever they're there.
Yeah, definitely. I've
Like
had to
even if
do
it's
this
once a week.
because I'll try to get them once a week. I mean, Sebastian lives so far now. But
Yeah.
Olaf and I meet every now and then, so that's good. But yeah, the thing that I basically am doing now is finally helping. Took me a
Good.
while to figure that out. Like it took much longer than it should have, but
Mm-hmm.
it's helping. I've done a few pull-ups yesterday again, and it's sounds crazy, but pull-ups I used to not be able to do them anymore, and now I can just do
Mm-hmm.
pull-ups, so that's really good.
You may
Overhead
also
press
find
is
that some
still.
band work. You may also find that some band work helps you a lot with the bench. Like what you
You,
do is
y
you say
oh yeah, I know.
I know you can see me, but so you're going to be set up like this with the band, and what you
Hmm.
do is you basically turn it out like this and reach, and so you're
I can
stretching
see
it
how that works.
in front of
Yeah.
you, but so you're not bringing it all the way back like this. That does nothing. You keep it in front of you, and as you're coming out, you're going to find that like, oh wow, that actually like it forces, and you can play with different angles as you open it up, and you're going to find the things that
Yeah.
make the right muscles work. And it's the same concept as
It's the
the
exact same
positional
thing, yeah.
isometrics. Yeah, so I would play with
Yeah,
that, and it doesn't
no,
need to be a heavy band. In fact, I would use something
no,
that
no.
feels a little bit too light.
I feel like that will be the next step. Actually, yeah. I can see how that makes sense because that's what I'm trying to do, but then
Yeah, yeah.
without resistance. That's what
That's
I'm
what I'm
trying
thinking. I'm
to.
just yeah, and I'm thinking like, I think that if you do it this way, then you'll find that you feel a lot more comfortable, and it's
I'll
gonna be
try
what you're
to.
looking for or closer to it.
I'll try it in an hour because I'm going to the gym in an hour, and then I'll let you know. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be good to hear.
All right. Let's wrap this podcast up, guys. Thank you for sending in your questions, and we had a blast answering them. He also had a blast answering my questions this time. And keep sending them in, and we'll keep answering them. Have a good one, guys.
Absolutely. Yep. Until next time. See you later.